Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first Lungarno Chats online. Super excited to be able to adapt our new environment and move this initiative. Big thanks to Helen at Florentine for nudging me to do this. And given everything that was happening around the world, I immediately thought of Rod Christie. He is on the front lines in the oil and energy markets. And I thought, we're very focused on the virus right now, but wouldn't it be interesting to just sort of understand what's happening in industry and in the oil market? So before we get started, I'd like to also share with you a very important initiative that the Fiorentina team, AC Fiorentina, did here in the city of Florence. They started a GoFundMe campaign called Forza e Cuore, and we're very lucky to have Alessandro Ferrari here, Director of Communications for the Fiorentina. It's been a very successful campaign. In the chats, we'll have the link. Here's the page to it. They've already raised over 860,000 euros. We will be doing a contribution on behalf of the Lungarno Chats, and they support two very important institutions here in Florence. One is the Careggi Foundation, one of the very leading hospitals, I would say, in Italy, as well as the Santa Maria Nuova Foundation, which is obviously one of the leading hospitals here as well. So a big thank you to Alessandro, to the Comiso family, the Fiorentina. It's such a great initiative, and we're happy to participate. Alessandro, if you'd like to say something, even in Italian, we'd love to hear it.
Ok, thank you, grazie Morgan, grazie per le parole e anche per la possibilità di poter dire due cose su Forza e Cuore. Siamo partiti un mese fa, il 17 marzo, abbiamo raccolto 860.000 euro. Questi 860.000 euro sono divisi tra, come dicevi tu, Fondazione Careggi, quindi 430.000 euro Fondazione Careggi al momento e 430.000 euro la Fondazione Santa Maria Nuova Onlus, che cura 4-5 ospedali nell'area sia di Firenze che ad esempio Montanicari a Bagno a Ripoli. Questi soldi servono per comprare dei materiali di prima necessità per gli ospedali, per i medici, per gli infermieri, perché come sapete la lotta è ancora dura. Ci sono ancora veramente situazioni molto molto complicate e le materie prime, gli strumenti servono veramente tanto in questi ospedali. Quindi chiunque ha donato da 5 euro a quello che hanno fatto i giocatori della Fiorentina o la famiglia Commisso in particolare, ogni donazione è importantissima. È importante per la famiglia Viola, è importante per Firenze, è importante per ognuno di noi che fa un gesto di questo tipo. Quindi io vi ringrazio tantissimo per questa opportunità, per avervela potuta raccontare e forza e cuore a tutti. Grazie.
Grazie mille e spero di potervi avere presto di nuovo sui chats, che state facendo un progetto molto più grande, molto importante per la città.
Volentieri Rocco Commisso, Gio Barone saranno al più presto presenti con voi in chat, in inglese ovviamente.
Okay, grazie Alessandro. So just as Alessandro was saying, for our non-Italian speakers, it's just the severity of the situation. The hospitals are found short on supplies, critical supplies, doctors and medics and nurses on the front line. So all of these resources are helping to alleviate the situation by providing vital I'd like to move on now to introduce James Carroll, Deputy James, very helpful. Jane, sorry, can you hear me?
We couldn't, Morgan, unfortunately, but now we can.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know which part at what point I dropped out, but
didn't catch most of it, unfortunately. So you might
okay, I'm sorry. Just briefly, basically, Alessandra was saying how thankful they are. Any support these funds really go to help people on the front lines, mostly with materials in this critical moment. But I just introduced you, Jane Farrell, wonderful deputy editor of the Florentine, a very important newspaper, a magazine here in the city. And Jane, you've been a regular on the Lungarno Chats and really added an important component to it. So I've asked Jane if she can share what is happening in the online space today.
Yes. So hello, I'm Jane from the Florentine, and usually my appearance at Lungarno Chats is to give a brief forecast of the best upcoming events. Obviously, we've had to adapt that to give you the best of the digital activities that you can take part in. So the first that I'd like to share with you is the Plants and Flowers Market, which is usually a highlight of this time of year for many of us, held at the Giardino dell'Orticoltura. And it was initially supposed to be held from the 25th of April until the 1st of May. And we can imagine how wandering the gardens with those beautiful vivid colours and all the intoxicating scents and the incredible variety every year of botanical delights is a favourite of this time of year. We can't do it, but what we can do is bring some floral joy to our own homes, courtesy of the Società Toscana di Orticoltura, who have brought their fair to an online store. So that means that the succulents, orchids, fruit trees, bulbs and herbs, and everything else that those with a green thumb might desire, they are available for purchase and can be collected in the Giardino di Orticoltura. It will be open only for collection purposes, thanks to special permission by Comune Council Member Cecilia Del Re for the use of space inside the garden. The date for this virtual market is not fixed yet, but it will be in about 2 weeks. So keep an eye on the website given on the slide for that updated information. The next one is related to this, and it's another initiative by the Società Toscana di Orticoltura in collaboration with the Municipality of Florence and Fondazione Cia Firenze. And that is the Fiori a Firenze competition, which is granting an award to the most beautiful flowered balcony. The initial deadline of the 30th of April has been extended to the 7th of May, given our extended time in our homes. So there is still time to dedicate to gardening and bringing some beauty to your balcony, making it something you'll be glad to be contained to. There is, of course, the added incentive of prizes, including vouchers for the purpose of purchasing garden goods, as well as publication of a photo of your balcony in Il Bollettino magazine, as well as membership to the Tuscan Horticultural Society. Not to worry if your balcony is less Garden of Eden and more abandoned churchyard, you can still take part by voting online for your favourite. The next one then is the Odeon Cinema, who have collaborated with the Department for the Environment and the Cinema Ambient Festival, who are bringing a selection of green-themed films to your home, keeping with the green theme, as you can see. A new title will be released every 3 days for free on their website, and topics include climate change, eco-sustainability, and also how we can develop greener ways for the future, using this time in quarantine to perhaps study up on how we can create a better world. Cinema La Compagnia has also released a free selection of films that you can stream from your home, and their website is also one that's worth checking out. The next one then is the Florentine Craftsmanship Auction. Artisans, as we know, are the heart and soul of Florence, and now giving us even more reason to love them, there is a charity project launched by the Artisans of Florence in which 115 works by 20 participating craftspeople, organised by Riccardo Bartel & Co., will be sold in an online auction, and the proceeds of which will be entirely donated to Careggi Hospital. This will start on the 23rd of April at 10 a.m. and finish on the 4th of May at 4 p.m. using the Pananti auction house. Some of the highly covetable works feature names such as Pampaloni, Bottega di Arte Maselli, and Il Bronzetto, among many others. The next one then is Monteverdi Tuscany, another very interesting initiative. They've created a digital artist in residence series to support musicians, while also introducing a welcome injection of culture and music into our homes, something I'm sure that many of us are seeking solace in while we're confined. And this will continue into the month of May and feature many renowned international musicians who will be lending their talents to bring us some joy and comfort. And there'll be performances of jazz, classical, and opera, accessible via the Monteverdi Tuscany website. Participating artists in this include the LA jazz performer Steve Tyrrell, Barry Banks, Matthew Polenzani, and a host of others that are well worth tuning into. The final one then I'd like to share is perhaps one you've already seen, but if not, I highly recommend it. The beauty of this season is simply made by the presence of wisteria, and not getting to catch a glimpse of it would feel like missing out on something glorious. So thankfully, they have created a webcam that will last until late April to allow us to dream about all our future ambles through the gardens of Villa Bardini. The initiative was created in collaboration with Fondazione Firenze and Fondazione Parchi Monumentali Bardini e Peron, and it is guaranteed to grant a few minutes of peace and tranquility. So that's my lineup, but I think what you'll have noticed here is that so many of the events that have been organized have a green theme. So what that seems to me is that we're all seeking the space and beauty of nature, which hopefully we'll all be enjoying again before too long. But in the meantime, we can brighten up our quarantines online with these digital activities. For more events, you can also see the weekly best events listing on the Florentines website. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Jane. Is the volume okay? Jane, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, perfect. That's magnificent. So I'm going to just share a few slides with you. For those of you that are new to the Lungarno Chats, I'd like to kick off with some recent observations. There's been a lot that's been happening in our world recently, so I try to make it succinct. So I'll just go through these PowerPoint quickly, and then we'll get to the best part of the show with Rod. So we talked about the Fiorentina. Thank you all for supporting it. I'd like to say thank you again to the Florentine. They've done an incredible job with no matter what's been happening in the world, they've really stepped up. And also a very big happy birthday. They turned 15 today, and they've really become a major part of the city. They've also launched a great initiative called TF Together, which moving a lot of the online events and creating a very interesting series. So we're super excited to be a part of that. I'd also like to thank the British Institute. They have a very rich cultural program, which they've also moved online. Every Wednesday, they have a great art history series. For both of these institutions, they obviously, these events are free, but they rely on support. So if you do enjoy it, I please encourage everyone to support in any way you can. So I saw this quote by Lenin: there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. I couldn't think of a more appropriate time. Just a few days ago, Jessica Mayer is an astronaut, and she came back from being in space for about 7 months. And she did have an official quote that says, "It looks like we're going back completely to a different planet." So it will be certainly an interesting experience for us. I think she's being very politically correct. She's probably thinking, I'd like to keep my suit on, and when can I go back to the space station? Our priorities have kind of changed in these last few months. Coffee stayed the same. Unfortunately, our consumption and appreciation for alcohol has gone up, but luckily, the use of our cars has gone down. It has been unfortunate that our infatuation with sweatpants has gone up. Luckily, toilet paper has gone back to regular levels. All of us are staying at home, and so are the B-list celebrities. So this site, cameo.com, you can go and hire B-list celebrities that are at home. I was really excited because I wanted Snoop Dogg to do a little shout out for the Lungarno Chats, but he was not available. But the good news is I did find Mike Tyson. Haven't sent him the request yet. Not sure it's worth the $500, but I thought that was fun. Even Bansky, the artist, is at home. So you can see how he transformed his bathroom, much to the chagrin of his wife. And I just found out that the LA mayor announced that there are no live events or large gatherings up until 2021. That includes all the sporting events. This was a release from Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook talking about their stay-at-home policy. They're going to start letting people back into work with certain measures in May. But what I thought was really interesting is they've canceled all events with more than 50 people through June of 2021. This slide kind of summarizes how confusing the situation is. Here's Jim Cramer on Mad Money on CNBC. The Dow just had its best week since 1938, but of course the ticker below says we just lost 16 million jobs. So these correlations that we were used to, jobs and economy growth, seem to be disjointed now. Here's another slide. The NASDAQ bouncing right back and leading the effort, while the consensus is the earnings are going to be way down. One of these darlings of the NASDAQ has been Zoom. Zoom grew from 10 million users to 200 million users in 3 months. But a lot of zealous investors jump in and bought Zoom stock and pushed the stock way up. The only problem is they didn't look up the right ticker symbol. So they were buying Zoom, ZOOM, which was a Chinese company that had ceased operations, instead of ZM, which is the real Zoom. The SEC had to step in and delist it or stop it. So eventually they caught on and they bought the real Zoom. And so now Zoom is a $42 billion company, which is worth more than United, JetBlue, Delta, and American Airlines all together. So that gave me pause. Here's a video conferencing software with no hardware, basically, compared to all the infrastructure of 5 major airlines. So back to our astronaut, Jessica Meyer, she had this really cool picture of her at the space station. Now, thanks to Zoom, 200 million people can have that as their background. There are lots of businesses that are built on Zoom now. There's one called Goodnight Zoom. I thought this was kind of cool. It allows isolated seniors to connect with young children and read them books. New York just allowed marriages by Zoom. They're now legal. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that lost their job also lost it over Zoom. Many of the layoffs were communicated through Zoom. And if you look at the chart on the number of layoffs, we had about all the jobs that have been created since the last financial recession in 2009 have basically been wiped out in a matter of 4 weeks. So now 22 million people are unemployed, and 1 in 4 Americans have either lost their job or have had a pay cut. And in all the noise, I don't know if you've noticed how many major CEOs have left their companies. Disney, Microsoft, even though technically Bill Gates was on the board, but Hulu, IBM, LinkedIn, Uber Eats, Salesforce, eBay, MGM, Nestle, Volkswagen, MasterCard, and the list goes on. Kind of seems like maybe they knew that these were going to be difficult or challenging times. And one of the most challenging things is really this notion of liberty versus, the restriction of our civil liberties versus security. And this woman who has this sign, give me liberty or give me death, well, she could actually have both, but it's a little bit more complicated. This protester said, let's be like Sweden. If you look at the Sweden numbers, they're saying they're doing well, but they're basically 4 times worse than their neighbors in Denmark. So I'm not so sure I'd pick Sweden. And despite the fact that they show through cell phones how much virus and people have been in contact on spring break from the Florida beaches. The Florida beaches are now reopened. So the hashtag Florida Morons is now trending. This was an interesting, I looked at the air traffic over Italy and I counted about 6 planes Now, obviously, it's a lot smaller than the United States, but it looks like the United States has had basically no slowdown in air traffic. So this brings me to one of our main topics tonight, which is oil. And on Sunday, I started tracking the price of oil because I thought, this is incredible. Oil is at $20 a barrel, which basically was the price of a bucket of chicken wings from Kentucky Fried Chicken. Then on Monday morning, it dropped about $10 a barrel, which is the price of a shiny new power strip. And then mid-morning, it hit about $5, basically a Happy Meal at McDonald's. And then yesterday, I looked again, it was at $0. And I couldn't believe it. After I kept looking, now it's negative territory. This is the first time in our lifetime that's ever happened. So this causes a few challenges. The first one is really storage, and hopefully we'll get Rod's insight on this, is there's a real problem with storage. Oil is becoming a liability if you don't know where to store it or don't have a place to store it. And the second thing, which is really fascinating, is the break-even point for these oil-producing countries in order to support their budgets. And the United States, for example, it's at $50. So with that, if we're in negative territory and our oil industry needs to be at $50, and by the way, that's relatively low compared to a lot of other oil states, what does that mean going forward? So I tried to go through that quickly, but if you can believe it, all of that has happened pretty much in the last 6 weeks. So now I'd like to introduce Rod. Rod is EVP at Baker Hughes, Turbomachinery and Process. And Rod, it's great to have you back.
It's good to be back, Morgan. As you say, it's interesting times.
So I wasn't joking when all of this started happening a few weeks ago. I said, man, I would really love to find out where Rod is in the world right now, because everyone will remember this moment. I think kind of like 9/11. Everyone will remember where they were, where the lockdown started happening, and you really, it was unprecedented. So where were you? What?
So we were originally on the Austrian-Italian border skiing, and we woke up to northern Italy being shut, and the school ISF being shut for a week. So we chatted about it with some friends who were also there, and we said, look, we'll go to Prague for a week and let it sort itself out with respect to transportation. So we drove up here on the Sunday, and on the Monday we woke up to the Czech border being closed, and now we're in quarantine here, or we were in quarantine immediately for 14 days, having come from outside the country, and then the Czech Republic went into to lockdown as well. So there's a state of emergency here, which gives the government extra power to move and make decisions with a much smaller subset of the government. And basically, it's the first time in a long time there's troops on the border between Czech Republic and all the neighboring countries. So I think the good side about it is the house in Italy doesn't have as good internet connection, so we wouldn't be doing this. And working remotely, which is really what we've been doing from the company perspective for quite a while now, and I can talk more about that and what we did and how we set that up. But working remotely, it really doesn't make much difference where you are, because at the end of the day, this is what it looks like.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess just for everyone following us, can you just talk a little bit about Baker Hughes? It's really a massive company, real global footprint, and on the forefront really of the energy sector. Yeah.
So we're what we call an energy technology company, and we work in four large divisions, which is oilfield services, which is a business which is really upstream in the oil space, drilling, fracking, involved with fracking, recovery, completions, that side of it. Oilfield equipment, which is basically the production equipment and the flow equipment to get it from the reservoir, manage it and bring it to some kind of facility, whether that's a floating production vessel or onshore or into a refinery. Then there's the business that I run, which is the Turbomachinery and Process Solutions business, which is headquartered in Florence. And we're really involved in basically moving or changing the state of hydrocarbons. So we will re-inject, so we do compression, power generation, flow management. Liquefaction is a big part of our business, gas liquefaction, so it can be shipped from one country to another country, where pipeline is not a viable option. And then we have a digital solutions business, which really is sensing, diagnostics, controls, and sort of remote monitoring and diagnostics of assets. So the business is headquartered in Houston, actually Houston and London, and I think you'd look at us as being one of the sort of top two oil field service companies. There's basically three sort of large companies that fall in the same space or similar space. We're a little bit different because we have a broader portfolio across the oil industry. But you think of Schlumberger, ourselves, and Halliburton predominantly, and that's probably a quick snapshot of where we are.
That's great. So can you take us back to, let's go back to January. I mean, were you already seeing sort of a slowdown in the global economy? Because it seems like there was already some pressures showing in the manufacturing sectors.
We could see obviously what was happening in China, because we have a footprint in China, and hence we've got an Asian team, an Asian region team, who were already seeing obviously the quarantines, the shutdown of the economy, etc. So you could see there was going to be a ripple effect through. Probably in January, the main thing for us, and as some of you may know, we have an annual meeting that we actually take place usually at the end of January, beginning of February. This year it was right at the very beginning of February, and that happens in Florence for Baker Hughes. And we bring in about just shy of 2,000 customers into Florence. And our first task really there was thinking about obviously the potential for people coming in, potentially from Asia. What would that mean from a COVID point of view? Was there a risk there? At the end of the day, the Chinese customers actually isolated and they didn't come, so they stayed home. But throughout the whole facility, we went really through looking at precautionary measures, sanitization, hand sanitizers, best practices. And as you came in, your welcome pack and the invitation was really around, the first stages of what you think of with respect to not so much the social distancing aspect, but the health and hygiene aspect of it. From that point in time, I'd say we very quickly started to think about the impact on the business. And we set up a crisis management team for Italy, for the whole Baker Hughes operation in Italy, thinking about what do we do? Because obviously the situation was starting to develop in northern Italy. We have plants in northern Italy. And the first thing we really looked at was what was the infrastructure for remote working. And then we offered remote working immediately to people who felt they may have a pre-existing condition, so they could choose to isolate. This was before, obviously, the government had imposed, self-isolation. And then from there, really getting, an idea of how could we run the place with a high percentage of people being remote, because clearly a lot of what we do is essential for the economy, not just of Italy, with respect to the operations in the economy of Italy, because it's an oil and hydrocarbon related business, but also for other countries in the world. So we were recognized as an essential service. And then the job was, how do we keep our people safe? So for a number of weeks now, we have people on the shop floor running the manufacturing facilities, assembling equipment, so that we can continue to move projects and technology and service equipment for customers. But what we would class as people who couldn't work from home, which, if you think of all the sort of salaried and white collar worker side of it, we have roughly 94 to, let's say 90. I think the highest we've had is 96% working remotely. And interestingly enough, we've had some really good learnings with that. I mean, all of a sudden, whoever thought Italians could actually be on time and punctual? All our meetings tend to start on time and tend to finish on time. They're all done this way. We've had areas of the business that have been far more productive because they're able to concentrate. There's no distractions. There's no meetings. They can very much get down to what is it that they do and how do they operate their business. And then the other thing we've done is we segregate out the teams. So we looked at business continuity and we made sure that key teams and key members of those teams never were in the same place. So that if we had somebody who came down or was unfortunate enough to come down with COVID, we were able to identify the first circle of people who'd been with them, have them isolate, but not actually take out the business at the same time. So I would say a tremendous amount of work by the crisis management team, the production managers in all our different factories around Italy, and also I'd say the sort of government relations team, because we've worked very, very closely with the authorities around the development of, what were our processes, how are we doing it, and also shared that as best practice. So they flowed that out to some other businesses that were looking to develop a system of work and a process that could keep people safe.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a massive initiative. What about on your deliverable side? I mean, I imagine there's delays in getting products. I know a lot of them are multi-year projects, but any impact there on the demand side?
So the demand, I mean, let's say we're about a sort of $6-7 billion business annually, and then what happens is we have to refresh that backlog, and refreshing that backlog is really the demand side that you were talking about. So we can start to see, obviously, all of our customers cutting back. So in the first sort of 3-4 weeks, they've all announced CapEx reductions, so new spending, new projects related to both oil price and demand. So there's about $30 billion of CapEx has come out the industry already, and that'll certainly have an impact in the out years. We're a relatively long cycle business, and we'll continue to execute the backlog we've got, obviously at a pace the customer can manage.
Yeah,
you're back.
Yeah, there's an important document that you put out that I think that a lot of the industry looks at. Is it the Baker Hughes rig count?
It is.
And
it's the North American.
It's being quoted a lot now.
Yeah. It's the North American rig count. So it's a proxy for activity in the unconventional space in North America. So what you think of with all the shale oil and gases, where that's obviously developed in the last 10 years, and it's an area which is really linked to the West Texas index that you mentioned earlier on, which went to -37 yesterday. So as I said to you earlier, if you had some spare space, a tank at the back, you could get someone to pay you $37 to take a barrel away, which is not a bad thing if you're the recipient. But certainly for the oil companies, I think you'll see COVID and the shutdown of basically all of the economies around the world has dramatically reduced demand. You think you showed the slide about aviation. I'm not really sure who's actually really flying in the US these days, because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of people flying. And when I talk to colleagues, they're clearly not flying. So I'm not sure what that air traffic's actually doing. But part of our business, we're very closely related to GE Aviation, and we talk to them on a regular basis. So we can see the stress in the aviation industry. That's phenomenal stress, and that'll go on. A lot of airlines, I think, will have, unless they get bailed out, they're going to have a very, very tough time. You've already seen early this morning, Virgin Australia went to into liquidation voluntarily. You see others, I think, will have the same challenge, and that just knocks on you. So that's a refined product of oil and gas. You've got obviously less automotive transport, less shipping, and then the economy itself is just not running. So even and the WTI going negative is a reflection of a couple of things. One, the historic cutback of 10 million barrels of oil by OPEC wasn't enough. It's not enough. There's still too much production, because the forecast for second quarter, for the quarter we're in now, is that it'll cut back even further. And then in North America, the tanks basically are starting to top. So futures, which is really what they were looking at on the FTI, on the WTI index, is that there's nowhere to put it. So in many of these cases, shutting in the well, in a lot of these, you shut in the well and you actually lose the well, so you'd have to re-drill. So there's quite a lot of impact in the event that you have to. Depends on the reservoir, but you can lose the well by closing it in.
So you can't just shut off part of it and then wait a couple of years.
No. Wow. You'd have to re-drill and re-stimulate in some cases, and hence that's a costly exercise for the oil companies.
And can you just talk us through what happened with OPEC and OPEC Plus? Can you just give us some color on a lot of different characters, a lot at stake?
I mean, I would say it started with a couple of things. It started with obviously Russia and Saudi having a bit of a spat over who's trying to maintain share as the market went down. I think the other thing that's very clear, neither Saudi Arabia or Russia particularly like the North American unconventional space. So I think there was an opportunity they saw to make it very tough for that space and try and close in some of the production in North America. Now, both, you go back to your chart earlier on, both countries require a certain amount of oil price to maintain their economy. And it's now at a point where really it's tough for both Saudi and for Russia.
So I guess two questions. So one is, if it looked like, at least from the charts that I was looking at, that I was saying that the break-even point for the United States is about $50 a barrel, but it looked like Russia was a little bit higher, and then Saudi Arabia was, I think, in the $70 to $80 a barrel.
Russia's about 65, and Saudi's probably around, with what they're doing just now, about 70, 75.
So did they just figure that if they could just endure the pain longer than the United States, and maybe.
I think the other thing that is playing into everyone's mind right now is what does peak oil look like, and in fact, has peak oil already gone? And if you're an economy that is sitting on a lot of oil, can you get it out the ground? And today the general consensus is we're not going to, as we go through energy transition and we move to other ways and we think of efficiency and decarbonization, electrification, clean fuels, you name it, there's a whole raft of things play in that space. We already know that we'll not use all the oil that's around. Now, you go back to the 70s and 80s, there was always this, we're going to run out of oil, the world will run out of oil. That's not going to be the case. We're going to have shifted off of oil to something else long before we run out. So places like Saudi and Russia, who have huge reserves of oil, would like to monetize it. So keeping share and keeping that moving is key.
I was looking at the stock price of Aramco, because Aramco is the largest. I think it is the largest company in the world, or the most profitable. They're the main oil company of the Saudi royal family, and I guess they floated part of the company, but it only went down, I think, from maybe $35 to $30 a share. I would have imagined that with oil being their main source of revenue, that they would have been taking a much bigger hit.
I'll be honest with you, I haven't looked at Saudis. I've looked at, a lot of the rest of the industry, and, oil took a fairly big hit. So the IOCs went down, 58, they've recovered back. They're still about 34% down. Yeah. What the S&P 500 went down $10 trillion. It's recovered by $5 trillion, but it's still down $5 trillion. So, I think the difference between this and the financial crisis is the financial crisis was contained basically in the Western world and basically in a sector, in a variety of sectors. So it was a financial system issue. This is getting everything. So this is going to get emerging economies. It'll get, Western developed, economies as well. This particular downturn will have, I think, a much tougher recovery. Look, a recession, global recession averages something like 13, 14 months. Mm-hmm. If you look at them all, chances are this will be on the long side of that, because you just think of the damage it's being done economically. It's gonna take quite some time. You go back to the airline industry. Not everyone's going to hop on a plane. For business, I would like to think I don't travel as much in the future, because we're getting used to talking to each other this way. And the number of customers I've talked to who have said, of their own free will, have said, God, we spent so much time on planes and it was so wasteful. I can do this and it works. I've got a relationship. I already know you. So unless I'm relationship building, I already know you. I can have a chat. You and I can have a chat. You could ping me. We already have a relationship. So now it's easy for us to chat like this. We don't, apart from, enjoying a wine together, there isn't actually a need for us to get together for business.
Yeah. In fact, I'm wondering, a lot of companies, this situation has really forced that last piece of sort of the digital transformation, where, so many industries now have just adopted and adapted that, the productivity, I think, will start going up, and I don't think it will go back necessarily. One question that I had for you was just sort of on the role of government intervention. The Fed in the U.S. has basically said, we're just going to buy everything that we're going to need to buy, unlimited money, which is kind of a strange situation. Again, we went basically in the last 6 weeks from, free money, 0% interest rate on crude oil. But if you look at the oil market versus like the stock market has had heavy government-backed intervention through the Fed, and the oil markets, maybe through OPEC trying to do a deal, but there hasn't been like the U.S. government going in and buying U.S. oil futures or anything like that. Do you think that would happen, or do you think that is outside of their realm?
There was whether it's real or not, Trump did come out and say that it was time to, at this price, it was time to go, restock the strategic supply. So whether they buy that,
they don't have that much space, though, right? Once he fills it up.
Yeah, I think the thing that I find it really interesting, certainly from a U.S. perspective, is apart from the rhetoric. With the amount of money that's flowing out, it's more like a Bernie Sanders government right now, because the welfare state seems to be on steroids to some extent. The way it's worked, and I know it's a bit of a sweeping statement, but it's very, very different for the US. So I don't know that this is, I don't think for anyone this is long-term sustainable. It's, and also I think the challenge is going to be, and we've already started talking about this and planning on this, and that is, as lockdown comes out, we're not going to put everybody back in the factory. There's no, if there's, if we have a case and we've got everybody there, so we're we're going to look and say, what's the minimum number we need to bring in? What are the teams that have been working remotely that really do need to work from the facility or work with other people? And we're going to continue to be very cautious about how we bring everybody back together, because you can see it elsewhere where, there's potentially a second wave or potentially even a third wave. So, the planning and the management afterwards is going to be very important as well. But it's going to mean that recovery is going to be slower, or, it's certainly not going to be, it's not going to be a V-shaped recovery. This will probably be a U, and it, probably be a prolonged U.
Prolonged U. So if anyone has any questions, please put it in the live chats. So just going back, because one of the main issues, of course, is storage. I mean, this sounds a little ridiculous, but could a Carnival cruise line retool 26 of its ships and turn them into tankers? Obviously, it would take time, but I'm exaggerating.
Yeah. Look, I mean, the last down cycle for the industry, people went out and they bought space in large crude carriers, and they weren't shipping oil around because it's not, the demand is down, so you don't have to move it around. So people do take space and fill different tankers. Look, the WTI is down, Brent is down, but it's not negative. Brent is still, still in sort of $22, $23 mark right now. Well, it was the last time I checked. Who knows? I mean, as you say, things are moving at such a pace right now. It's down, but it's a different reflection because it's moving in a different way.
Okay. And as far as opportunities, I mean, sometimes, it doesn't seem like it's a rational market right now. Like the USO is, I guess, a futures fund. Do you see any opportunities right now, or things that are obviously way out of whack?
Yeah, I think there's a number of opportunities that you look at. One is just, if I just look at the business itself, what an experiment. Running the place remotely, we will do things differently. Do we need all the same bricks and mortar? Do we set it up differently? Where are the areas? First quarter, part of our engineering team, the team that does new product development, had their best quarter ever from a productivity point of view, because they had nobody, they had no one over their shoulder. They didn't get distracted. So, there are things that we can look at and go, we want to do those differently. I think there's, back end of this year, and through next year, there will be distressed assets. There's no two ways about it. Cash and liquidity is going to be king all the way through this, and not everybody pays enough attention to it. And you can have the best order book.
Still too early for that.
Yeah, but you could have the best order book in the world, but if you run out of cash, you run out of cash and you close the doors. So liquidity is, very much a focus right now. And then I think the opportunities are probably more around some of the energy transition spaces. So what moves faster? I mean, you can see environmentally, you can see the benefit straight away. Taking this much pollution out of the atmosphere, taking this much aviation, transport out of the atmosphere. If you look at it, and this happened during 9/11, if you look at daytime and nighttime temperatures, you'll see the spread is getting bigger, because it gets colder at night and warmer in the day, because you don't have high level seeding of a veil of cloud from aviation. So I think the question is, do people kind of say there's an environmental benefit here, we're down, let's use this time to push through some of the moves into different technologies and go a different way. So I think there's an opportunity for us to focus in there. And it was part of our strategy anyway, because we can see that, obviously oil and gas will get transitioned out. One of the things we've been looking at is really, how do we take the core competencies and capabilities that we have and pivot them into newer energy technology? So we're already, down that line. So I think that's probably the biggest opportunity for us.
Great. Let me just see if Jane, if there's any questions from our audience, because we're almost up on the hour. Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Well, first of all, well done. That was such a comprehensive talk that most people were in thoughtful silence, but we do have a few questions. one of which is from a proud Nuovo Pignoni engineer. And his question is, what is the first thing that impressed you positively when you started working in Florence?
That's a good question.
I'm telling you, and I think I've told the team before, the passion. I'd say passion and also the skill sets, because some of the artisan skill sets that we have and the understanding of what we do all the way through onto the shop floor is phenomenal. And those are things that you never want to lose, because it's infectious. Our customers and our partners, when they go on, into our facilities, they see it, and they, I've had customers say to me, I wish we had the passion for what we do that this team has for what they do.
That's great. Well, Rod, I hope that we can see you soon in person, and thanks so much for coming back. There's just so much happening right now that you have such a unique perspective on. So thank you for sharing this time with you. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Alexandra and Helen, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.